listen to full-length, commercial-free episodes of the Divorcing Religion podcast on Patreon. Please sign up at patreon.com/Janice Selby or click the link in the show notes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. Today's guest is a rising star in the music world, a singer, songwriter, and entrepreneur. I'm talking about award-winning musical artist Angela Soffe, whose work and story have been featured in independent films, commercials, and podcasts worldwide. Angela's recent album, Second Wind, was a move out of the quiet of personal darkness and reflects her challenges of stepping away from 30 years in Mormonism. Second Wind won the nomination for Americana Album of the Year by the Independent Music Awards in 2019. And it's easy to hear why. I absolutely love her vocals. You can get a taste of them yourself on her website, angelasoffe.com, and that's SOFFE.com. Angela is also the founder of Heroica, a business that guides women to rewire their minds to create the life of their dreams. And we met when Angela was a speaker at Court 2021, the inaugural conference on religious trauma. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. It's an honor to be with you.
I get tired just reading all the stuff that you're involved with and all the different things that you do. And of course, you're also a mom on top of all of that. So you have a very busy schedule. Thanks for making time for us.
Oh, thank you. And I should probably update my bio. The Second Wind was from 2018, and I just released a new record over the summer.
And what's that record called?
That one's called Bloom.
Oh, lovely. I love that word. It's such a beautiful title. Oh boy, I'm sure you're going to win all sorts of awards for this one too. I just keep going back to your site and listening. It's just your vocals are so comforting. It's so warm. It just feels like being wrapped up in a blanket. So I encourage everyone to have a listen and to support you in your artistry. You've had such an interesting life, and you didn't even grow up in America. You're living, I think, in Washington State now, but you grew up somewhere else entirely. Can you tell us a little bit about what your growing up was like and the religious influences for you?
Sure. Yes, I grew up in Asia, specifically in Hong Kong. I was there for a year as a 7-year-old, and then moved to Manila in the Philippines a year later. So I spent most of my growing up years in Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines. And it's very metropolitan, very bustling, big city. I mean, I don't know if there's a word to describe just how tumultuous the city is, but it also was really this haven of so much love and nurturing for me. As a kid, I went to an international school and we had a very tight-knit community. And of course, I was raised by in a Mormon background. I come from generations back of Mormon pioneers who crossed the plains of the United States to escape persecution and founded the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. And so my ancestry comes from both sides, from that line. And so religion was not only just something that we practiced on Sunday, but it was the very fabric of our lives. It was everything to us. It was every meal. It was every decision we made. It's how we interacted with our friends and all of that. So, and I would say I had a very positive childhood. My parents are so loving. And I think being somewhat removed from the Mecca, that Salt Lake City is for Mormons. We had sort of a fringy, I had a fringy experience a little bit with Mormonism. We didn't have like all of the same opportunities that my cousins did that were in Utah. But still the doctrines and the teachings were very much the same. So I went to early morning seminary every morning at 6 a.m., all through high school. And I was president of our seminary and president of the young women's group that I was in. And And we went to church every Sunday and followed all the rules and checked all the boxes. And I was a really obedient. I mean, my mom might say differently, but I was a really good girl, in quotes, good girl.
Yeah.
I didn't party, I didn't drink, I didn't do all that stuff. I was a really, I tried to follow the commandments.
Yeah.
And that we were given,
Mm-hmm.
and really do my best to be someone that my parents would be proud of, that followed the teachings and respected them.
So you respected those teachings. You believed them. You took them in your heart, and they helped form your identity.
Definitely.
So you weren't like a skeptic all the way along. I sometimes hear from people who say, I knew at 10 years old that I didn't believe. And I'm just like, what would that be like? Because I was hook, line, and sinker. I was all the way in to evangelicalism. And it sounds like you were really committed to the Mormon tradition as well.
I was. And I wouldn't say that I had a complete understanding, almost like, I don't know that any teenager or young child really understands what they're doing or getting into. They're following the programming of society and of their family, which is what every kid across the world is experiencing right now. We are just the product of the environments that we find ourselves in. So I wouldn't say I had a complete depth of understanding. It wasn't until I became a Mormon missionary that I really understood what I had signed up for as a missionary, as a member of the Mormon faith. So,
and then you married someone else, another Mormon.
I did. Yeah. So I left the Philippines to go to Brigham Young University when I was 18, 17.
That must have been some culture shock.
It was because not only is the United States so different from how I grew up, but Mormonism and being on campus with like 60,000, 30,000 other Mormons in their early 20s was just this like overwhelming culture shock. I
didn't know it was so big, that place. Wow.
Yes. Wow. And in the city, in Provo, in Utah, there are actually 2 universities. So it's a town that's just like exploding with young, excited pre-mission, post-mission Mormons. And so it was very bewildering and overwhelming. And I suddenly felt like, I had come from a place where I stood out, physically. I really did, because I don't look Filipino.
Right.
And then moving to the States, where I was just completely, I looked just like everyone else, and I walked and talked like everyone. Well, I didn't really talk because I sounded a little bit different, but on the outside, I looked very American, and on the inside, I felt very different. Yeah. But I got to know Mormonism on a deeper cultural level while I was there. There's subcultures, and so I was heavily involved, in our wards and in our church and activities, and everything centers around religion at BYU. So after that, I decided to go on a mission. So I served in Brazil for 1.5 years, and I met one of the other missionaries that was there in passing. He went home to his state of Utah and wrote me a letter. Anyway, we started writing, and when I got home, we dated. And so that's who I married, was a missionary that I had met in Brazil. And we've been married for 18 years now, just hit our 18th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's kind of miraculous. I will be very honest that we're still together after all that's happened. So I'm proud of that.
Yes. So you get married, and you're maybe on a somewhat typical Mormon trajectory, are you? Where you're going to be populating the planet with lots of children that you can also raise in Mormonism, and living this happy Mormon life. And then what happened? Because that's kind of different from the way things look today.
Yeah. So we got married in the temple in Salt Lake City, the one that you see on all the pictures. And as the time went by, we went to school, went to grad school, and, life happens. We had 3 children. It was a slow, I would say, disintegration of my faith, I started noticing things that I didn't like or that didn't make sense. Most of it was, it doesn't make sense to me, or I don't like that practice. Why do we do that? That seems harmful. That seems judgmental. That seems inaccurate. But like any other Mormon will tell you that's been through this process, you are encouraged to let go of those questions and just put them on a shelf somewhere.
Oh, the shelf, yes.
The proverbial shelf. So I had a closet full of shelves, and I was putting everything in there. And it wasn't until we had finished grad school in DC and made a new resolve that when we took our first job in Washington State, where I am now, I decided, you know what, I have been so wishy-washy in my heart. I've been questioning, and I'm recommitting. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to go to the temple every month. I'm going to pray harder. I'm going to read my scriptures more. I'm going to really just be the devout person that I know I need to be. And I've been a little bit, skeptical, and I'm sorry, God, I've been so, I felt like I needed to repent of my questions. Right. So we moved to Washington State. We joined a ward, which is our, the congregation is called a ward. And
And were you guys working in the church? Or your careers were outside the church?
Our careers were outside of church. Yes.
Okay.
And typically with Mormonism, it's an unpaid congregation. It's that no one is paid except for those who are in the higher up, who are the general authorities. They have a stipend that they are given. I'm never sure how much it is. No one ever really knows, but
it's a secret.
Yeah. So I know those are paid, but everyone else, it's a lay ministry. So, so at that time, I really felt like I was going to dig my heels in and really be more devout. And I was called as the choir director here in town. And my husband was called into, a higher calling in the priesthood. And things were going great. We're making friends. And then one day in church, I just started feeling those feelings again of like, I don't agree with what's being said. I don't like this. Something just, now I know it was like my true self talking to me, but I thought it was Satan. I thought it was the devil trying to get to me in church.
Sowing seeds of doubt. Yeah.
Yes. I thought it was, the whisperings of the evil one. And so I was so torn up inside, and I would come home from church crying. And anyway, I'll make a long story short, but I decided to allow myself to investigate why I was feeling this way. And so I spent probably a month researching, doing things I wasn't supposed to do. Like,
did your husband know?
He did. I told him that he knew I was so upset. He'd see me so upset, and he'd say, just trust your faith. Like, you know that this stuff is true. You're just having a hard time, and you need to rekindle the faith and read more confirming books. And
so what were you looking up? I cut you off there. You were spending time looking up some things.
Yes, I was looking up. I actually went to the library because I didn't want to spend any money on anti-Mormon literature.
Sure. Okay.
Because we're taught not to look outside, because the internet is an evil, scary place.
Wow.
Where there can be, Satan loves to write articles too. And so you could find all sorts of misinformation written by people who want to tear down the church. So I was very, very scared to do it, but I thought I need to see the whole spectrum. So I read books by Mormons. I read books by just historians that said they didn't have an agenda. And then, just across the board. And I read journals, and I was expecting to find that I was wrong, that my doubts were in fact unfounded.
Right.
And here is why it makes sense. Here is why you can trust what you've been taught your whole life. And unfortunately, it was the opposite. And I discovered very quickly that none of it really lined up. And I don't even need to go into the details why. I mean, you can look up online why there are so many inconsistencies and the damage that is caused by a lot of these teachings. And not all of them, I'll say with the caveat that many aspects of Mormonism enhanced my life and made me who I am today. And I'm grateful for it. But I saw that the doctrinal pieces of Mormonism were not based on fact. That the Book of Mormon was not a factual document or historical in nature, like we are told to believe.
That had to be a huge shock.
Yeah, because I had spent a year and a half of my life preaching it and getting people to read it and bearing testimony that it was true. And
your parents believed it? Yes.
And my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my hundreds of cousins. I mean, it just, that was I think the most difficult part is realizing that you believe something different than the rest of your family, and not knowing how you're going to navigate that. So when that happened, it's like this trap door opened and my heart just like fell through. And it all just crumbled. And I didn't know all of a sudden who I was, why I was on this planet. Is there a God? I mean, all the existential questions come out of realizing that this paradigm you believed in is no longer serving you, nor is it factual. So you have to find something else to hold on to. And I became extremely lost for many years.
And you were still married to a believer.
Yeah. So it wasn't very long, though, until my husband, it was funny, one day he was walking by me. It was a Sunday, I remember. And I was reading one of these books and he snatches it from my hand. And he's like, "What is this trash you're reading?" And I was like, "I don't know, you can read it." And I never pressured him or said anything. I was just doing my thing. And I'm grateful that he let me do my thing. And he started reading it. And pretty soon he was reading another book and reading another book and reading another book, and all on his own. He also came to the same conclusion in less time than I did, actually.
Wow. So give us a time frame of that. So from the time you were in the church and you were really having your second set of doubts, and then you started going to the library, and then you realized, no, I've been sold a faulty bill of goods. Was that like 2 months, 6 months? How long was that?
From the time I started researching, that was probably April of 2013. By May, like a month or so. I mean, actually it was one night. I remember the evening that I put a book down, and the thought entered my head, what if everything I've believed in is a lie? And the moment that I entertained that question, it's like, that's when everything came off the shelf. The moment I allowed my brain and my heart to consider another solution, another like answer to these questions, it's like it all made sense. Like, of course it's not true. That's why this and this and this and this and this doesn't make sense.
Yes. And you can't make it fit.
No. And I couldn't put the puzzle back together once I had dismantled it. There was no going back. And so it wasn't like, it actually was in one moment, if that makes sense. It just took me months to finally accept that and own it.
And then you didn't blurt it out to your husband and say, "Oh, this is all a bunch of baloney." You just were quiet about it. And then he took that book and started reading. And was it again quite fast for him then? Once he started reading, he was like, "Oh, brother, okay, now it makes sense."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was even faster for him, I feel like, because I needed to read tons of books and like, well, no, okay, maybe they're wrong. And I'll go to this one. And And then, but for him, it was actually just one book.
Wow. It really poked enough holes in it that he could see through it. So then you're plugged into your Mormon community in Washington, and you're raising children in the church, and your parents and in-laws and cousins and everybody. What did you do? How did you keep going forward at that point? Did you tell them right away? Did you write a letter? Did you just keep it to yourselves?
Mm-hmm. I feel like this was probably the bravest, the time of my life that I've had to be the bravest was when I had to tell my friends, my family, my mom, the people that I respect and love. I feel like that's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do of all the things in life that are hard.
Because you knew it could come with a huge price tag, and it would be hurting them, and they'd be afraid for your soul, or
yes, because I knew I would be severing myself from my tribe, from my core. And it's not just like people you hang out with once a year, it's your identity. And so changing my identity, it was just very traumatic. It was hard, really, really hard. And I first kept it to myself, except for a few friends who I told, and I thought that they would be empathetic, non-judgmental. Turns out they were not. And so I lost a lot of friends, and I learned quickly that I couldn't talk about it to anyone.
Wow.
And so, but I still knew that, I knew that for my personality, I couldn't keep going and faking it. I couldn't just go as a social, cultural Mormon, which many, many Mormons do now. It's very normal to find people in a congregation that don't believe, but they come because, they want the social time and the support.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say most wards have many people in them that are not believing, but they found a way to navigate it. And I just knew from my personality that if I'm sitting in a pew, spending my time and my money, my tithing, my raising my children in an environment, I had better believe it.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
I couldn't sit there, and I did for about 6 months. I brought the kids. My husband stopped going immediately.
Wow.
Immediately. He was like, I'm done. This all makes sense now. I don't have to go to this church anymore.
Did he tell his family right away?
No.
His parents? No, just didn't say anything about it.
He just did. He told our ward, he removed himself from the priesthood obligations he had, and stopped going. Which was still really difficult, but that's his story. And for me, I kept going with the kids, and people at church would say, you're so brave. You're here without your husband. You're such a saint. You're so devout, and we're so proud of you. And which was like a dagger in my heart every time. But I remember I was the choir director, and so I finished out our Christmas concert, and then after that, I didn't go back. And my son was turning 8, which is the time that Mormons baptize their children. And we asked him if he would like to be baptized. And he said, do I have to get wet? And we said, yes, you have to get in the water. And he was like, no, I don't want to. And so it made it easy for us our children were so young. I mean, my oldest was 8. I had a baby in diapers. There was no real opposition to us leaving, except for, the social, the people coming by and wondering what was wrong and, trying to bring us back. And that was difficult. Really was.
How long did that go on?
The reactivation efforts?
Yeah, people trying to bring you back into the fold.
Oh, I think it's still happening. I mean, I still get the missionaries coming to our house all the time, texting me, calling me, and I welcome them in actually because I have been a missionary and I'm so empathetic.
Yes.
They're white. So it sometimes is a challenge because I still feel bad for them, but I am not interested. I think probably 2 years of reactivation efforts until our friends in town, now I know all these people. I've known them for so long that I think they've realized that we're not coming back. And then when I released my album, I think it made it pretty clear as well, that it wasn't just that I was lazy or that I wanted to drink wine. It was because of a much deeper reason.
Yes. And so how have you gone about building a supportive secular community for yourself? Has the music community kind of stepped in and helped to fill that void at all?
I didn't really start doing music again until my faith fell apart. And that was part of the hand in hand. I hadn't been playing music for a long time. And it wasn't until like the floor fell out underneath me that I turned to music as my therapy. And that's when I started writing again. And I think by the time I was, in the music community, in the industry like I am now, I already had a network that felt really good and natural to me. So it has been awesome to have expanding groups of social interactions.
Yes.
I would say there was a period of time, and anyone who's going through this, I guess I just wanted to say that there is a period of time between, where your old friendships don't serve you or they shun you and don't understand. And there's this gap until you can find new people that you relate to and that welcome you in. And so that is a transition period that can be really hard. And it was for me. I actually, I started going to a Nazarene church Bible study because I thought if it's not Mormonism, then it's probably one of these other Christian churches.
Surely God is somewhere. God's got to be found in one of these.
Yes. So I had some awesome ladies, they were all 20 years older than me, but we would sit around and discuss, religious themes, and it felt really good and familiar, but without the Mormonism. So I did that for about a year. That felt like the right, a softer place to land than nowhere. But even that, after a time, I saw that there were some, it was it was able to be deconstructed. And so that didn't work for me in terms of the doctrine and the religious teachings. I still loved them, and I still do actually as friends. And then I had to start looking for, what do you believe? And hey, what do you believe? And oh, isn't this interesting? And so I just had to be very exploratory and allow myself the room to not feel guilty about not knowing answers or exploring all different walks of life without judgment. And that was new for me, not judging myself or other people.
Yes. And that's such a key component to our healing and growth when we're able to swap out judgment for curiosity and give ourselves permission to just study and look into whatever piques our interest. And I tell people that life is really like a giant buffet table. As far as the eye can see, and fundamentalism would have us starve to death right at that buffet table. The reality is, as long as something isn't illegal or going to harm someone, we can take a bite of every dish on the table. It doesn't mean we're going to love everything on there. Some things we'll push away from, not interested. Some will go back for seconds. But we have to give ourselves permission to try out these different ideas and beliefs and experiences.
Absolutely. I think what happens with religion is you try the Jell-O and immediately you feel guilty because you've been told that Jell-O is bad, or you take, in my case, literally the sip of coffee.
That's right.
It was bad, and so I actually had to force myself to do things that were outside my comfort zone. I had to go and shop on Sunday, even though inside my brain was screaming, or I'd have to take that sip of wine in front of someone that I knew would judge me. I would do these things on purpose almost so that I could quickly I need to stop feeling guilty at every move. And I
Yes.
just need to try that Jell-O
Yes.
and not care who's watching.
Yes, that's right. And because it is like our guilt receptor gets hijacked and becomes very hypervigilant because of our fundamentalist religious training. So yeah, we have to be building new neural pathways in our brain and trying to become more comfortable with things that previously had been off limits to us, but there's no reason for them to be off limits to us because we're living an expanded, more open life now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It takes, I think, some conscious effort to be aware of the boxes that we've put ourselves in, even after we've left. You know, I'm still constantly trying to expand, trying to taste more things on the table because I know it's good for me. And I know that there's more to have, but we, for whatever reason, you know, and my personality, especially, I want to be where it's safe. And so if it feels like it's not safe, then my alarm system goes off.
Yes. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And that's even one reason why I did such a deep dive into fundamentalism, because rules were very important to me. My father was really volatile emotionally. So learning the rules and following the rules could keep me feeling safe. And then the more rules there were, the more I could feel even safer and safer. So that's part of what got me going down that rabbit hole. But that also can prevent us from moving ahead and exploring sometimes. So you've done a lot of work, a lot of growing in the last number of years. Have you been able to retain a relationship with your mother and with your family of origin?
I have. In fact, I just saw her over the weekend. I was in Utah visiting family and discovered that unbeknownst to me, many of my cousins have also had the same experience. And so we were able to talk and share. And so that's been really great. And I would say that my relationship with my parents is not as open as I would like it to be. We stick to the weather a lot. I mean, metaphorically speaking.
Yes.
But I found early on that it was really charged when she would ask me a question, and I would respond. It just made her upset. And they're at an age where I just don't, there's just not a whole lot of progress made when we discuss it. And so I would love to have a more open, vulnerable conversation or experience with them, but I have yet to feel like that's productive.
Yes.
So there's a lot of love, a lot of big hugs and, you know, tears on her part. And I know she's very sad that I'm lost and fallen in her eyes, but we have a good relationship. You know, we see each other, we get together, there's a lot of love. It's a kind of a sad love.
Was it difficult for you initially to travel back to Utah after you rejected? Yeah. I would think that'd be highly triggering.
Yes, it was horrible. I would start shaking, you know, I'd get like clenched jaw, even just driving down the freeway and seeing the billboards and, cause a lot of them have it's so religious that there are like references even on the billboards as jokes, you know.
Wow.
It was extremely triggering and it was very difficult to spend holidays, and it was like get in and out as fast as I could because everything was a reminder of how I was failing my family, you know, and how much I disagreed.
Yeah. So have you been in contact with any of your cousins who have left?
Yes, a lot of them, especially recently that I didn't even know about. So yeah, it's been really healing. I actually I shared a beer with my first beer with a cousin
Nice.
over the weekend at Oktoberfest. And, you know, we cheers and I was like, this is my first time having a beer with a cousin. And, you know, I'm not a big drinker, but it was kind of a cool moment because it just felt like I wasn't alone. I felt for so many years, because it was 10 years ago almost that this happened. And I always felt like I was the black sheep and there was no one else.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that that strikes me when I'm speaking with folks who grew up Mormon is that there can be a tremendous amount of pride in the fact that, the heritage, the Mormon heritage, and they were the pioneers and the first ones in Utah, and I can trace my lineage back, so many. That's not the case in most other religious groups to the degree that it is in Mormonism. And I imagine then when a person is picking apart the belief system and walking into a more secular identity, that has to make things feel even harder on some level, almost of I'm betraying all these other people in my lineage who believe this. I'm the first one. I'd rather look at it as breaking the chain. Your children are going to grow up free of this indoctrination, but to be the one that actually severs that link has to be hard.
Yeah, because there are two sides of that coin. And when you're coming out of Mormonism, your brain is still, it is still both. It is still like, it wants to believe, it wants to be part of it, and then it also wants to not. And so you have this like massive cognitive dissonance going on. And so you feel like you're betraying your past while you're also freeing the future at the same time. I would look at my children and feel so proud of them, like so happy that they get to live they get to make their own choices, right? And there's no one telling them, what they can and can't do. But at the same time, I'm hearing my mom express her disappointment that there's an empty seat at the table, that I have broken the link, the family tie. And it's like these two narratives at the same time are what make it really challenging. And also, you're right, Mormons, we hold so much weight to our heritage, almost to the point that it's like royal lineage.
Yes.
Like if you were to leave the royal family in England, what a disgrace to disown the crown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels much like that, like you are walking away from a heritage that has sacrificed everything for you. How dare you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Your ancestors walked across the plains, lost limbs, and you're willing to just let go of that.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Pack your bags, kid. We're going on a guilt trip. That's what it feels like.
Yes.
Oh, dear me. Well, I'm just thrilled that you have been able to connect with some cousins who've walked a similar journey, because it does feel really supportive and validating when we connect with others who understand where we've come from. And your music, I mean, there's just no hiding it for you, because it has informed the music that you've made, the music that's won awards. So there are thousands of people around your country who can relate, hundreds of thousands, to the words of your songs. And that's really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like when I wrote, especially Second Wind, it was this expression of like all my angst into music. And I didn't realize what it would mean for the people listening. I mean, I really just made it for myself. But for other people, we have a shared experience. Even if you're not Mormon and you're going through a separation and all the confusion and the anger and the those stages of grieving are a shared experience. And I think for me, music just gives a poetic way to express our pain and our joy and all the things we feel. And this most recent album that I put out, it's now that it's been 10 years, it's sort of a happier place to look at my life going forward. And and what matters to me now. And so I was happy to put out something that felt a little brighter and a little, just a little more positive and optimistic, because that's how I feel now on the other side of it.
Yes. Oh, and I think that's such encouragement for folks who maybe aren't there yet. They're on the journey, but maybe they've just started and it feels pretty dark. I'm wondering if you have any resources, either books, podcasts, movies, that were helpful for you, that you would recommend.
Yeah. Especially for, and I will direct this for those who are Mormon, because that's been my experience. But the one resource that helped me enormously is a podcast called Mormon Stories. And it's put on by Dr. John DeLynn, who is a friend of mine.
Nice.
And he actually had me at the end of, when all this was going on, I was just so deeply entrenched in listening. I had my earbuds in constantly, just listening to the stories of other Mormons who were going through the same thing, because I felt so alone. And so I would just listen constantly. Like, it was this reassurance, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. And then, when I put my record out, he actually invited me to be on the podcast.
Wow.
So I got to talk about what his podcast meant to me.
That's so cool.
It's a great resource for anyone who's needing to listen to people from all walks of life. It's people who have, been through a divorce because of it, or who have come out as bisexual or different form of sexuality that's not acceptable in the church. And it's just a really great platform to also connect with other people. And through that, I joined some groups, online groups, and we had some meetups. My husband and I started a group here, a support group for local people who are struggling. And so I really liked that in terms of resources to help. I know that now, because that was a while ago, I know that John is still putting on, he's still doing so much work with that. But there are many, many feminist podcasts and groups. There are even, there are groups of women who have gay children. There are so many more resources now than there were when I was going through it. There was really not very much. And it was quite silent online when I needed the help. So, but I would say that finding a support group, like I would go to, I live outside of Seattle, so I went to a retreat that was just a couple days, and met other people just like me that I didn't know existed. And then definitely the podcast. I think finding social groups of other human beings who are walking or have walked, your same path, is extremely healing, and it helps you heal faster.
Yes. And so I will just put a plug in here for recoveringfromreligion.org and journeyfree.org. And both of those groups, they welcome people who come out of every kind of fundamentalist religious background that you can ever imagine, religions, cults, all these things. And both of those groups have really powerful support networks for people who are on their journey of recovering from religion. And of course, the Conference on Religious Trauma. It's different now for me too. I've been out for about 10 or 12 years. And when I first was divorcing religion, I didn't have any words for it. I'd sit in front of the computer and I didn't even know what to type into the search bar. I just felt so lost, and I'd lost my faith, and it was really hard. And then being able to connect with Dr. Marlene Winnell and reading her book, Leaving the Fold, was very helpful for me. And then, of course, Dr. Daryl Ray, Recovering from Religion, finding out there are so many people out there who are emptying the pews, as they say. They're waking up and recognizing, you know what? There are other ways to live. I don't have to stay trapped in my parents' belief system. And they start exploring, and that's where they start learning about religious trauma and recovery. So thanks for sharing those resources with us. I'm really, really glad you made it out. And how can people connect with you if they want to get in touch with you?
They can go to my website. I have, it's angelasophe.com. There's a contact form. Those all go straight to me. I'm also on Instagram, Angela Sophe Music, and on Facebook. And yeah, I'd be happy to help support anyone who needs it. I think that connecting with people is one of the best ways to feel like seen and feel validated and understood. And I would also just add to your list of resources, if you have any sort of creative outlet that you can put your pain and your questions and your frustration, I've found that to be extremely healing, not just for, musicians, but if you like to paint or, woodworking or anything, creativity is such a beautiful outlet. If you have a choice between, drinking 2 bottles of wine or making something, I've found that creation is one of your greatest superpowers.
Beautiful.
That we all have. And and I just always encourage people to, find some outlet for what you're feeling. I think it really helps.
It's so powerful to be able to reclaim that creativity, which was often hijacked by religion. Oh, you're musical. Okay, you're going to be only singing for the church, or you're a writer. Okay, you're going to write for the church newsletter or whatever it is. So that's a part of reclaiming those pieces of ourselves, that creativity. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. And I wondered if you're still. You started up Heroica. Is that still something that's going? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started Heroica. It's a support system and coaching for women that have forgotten their power. Women like me, and I feel like everything that we do is for a former version of ourselves. And so I created Heroica to help women do the thing that they're scared of doing, or begin to take steps towards something that they think is impossible for them. Because that was my journey. Was I want to do this thing. I've always wanted to create more music, but it didn't fit into the box that I was raised in. And I thought I was supposed to just do all the things that the church told me to do. And I had so much a lack of self-confidence. And Heroica is really, it's actually a teaching platform. I have a course and coaching women through reclaiming their power and knowing how amazing they are and giving them the guts and the tools to go do the thing that they've always wanted to do.
Oh, I love that. That sounds so empowering. Do people find out more about it through angelasophe.com?
Yes. They can find their links there. And I'm also on Instagram. This is Heroica. And they can connect with me there. Yeah.
And if people want to buy your music, is that again something they do through your website?
They can do that. They can buy the actual songs, buy the whole album. They can order one that gets shipped to their house. If you still like CDs. and then online, all the songs are online. They're on all the, Apple Music and Spotify. But the best way to support music, I would say, not just for me, but is to go to a concert or I do house concerts as well, where I come to your house and you get your friends there and we have like the best time. I just play music and talk, and it's about an hour of like just sharing and music, and it's a little intimate party. So I love doing that. Cool. Those are donation based. And so really fun. But having, sharing an artist's music as much as you want to share, and streaming it, and all of those help.
Hooray! Oh, this has just been so encouraging. And it's really a pleasure to see your life continue to expand and your career take off. The farther you get from the things that held you back, you're just really, every door that's opening before you or you're pushing open, you're stepping right through. And it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been a journey. And I did want to mention, I forgot that I do have a song coming out that's very recovering from religion specific.
Yeah.
It's a single, and it's called Sometimes on Sundays, and it's about how it feels to miss your religion even when you don't want to.
Oh,
so
wow.
So just
that's
watch
powerful.
for that when that comes out.
Sometimes on Sundays. Wonderful. Okay. Well, this brings our Divorcing Religion podcast episode with Angela Soffe to its end today. I'd like to remind you to go to the Conference on Religious Trauma YouTube channel and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of the Divorcing Religion podcast. Buy your tickets for the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. And if you feel so moved, to support me on Patreon. All those links will be in the show notes, as well as links for Angela. And thanks again for joining us, Angela. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.